in the early years when I started making electronic music, I was heavily influenced by Berlin School. So basically everything I made was Berlin School. So the first 5-6 cassettes that I did, the first 2 CDs that I did were primarily Berlin School. I did 1 CD with John Kerr, Offshore Islands, which was heavily classical influence because John is a classical musician. But then in 1991, I discovered the American ambient electronic music. So I discovered the music of Steve Roach and Robert Rich, and instantly I was drawn in by it. And at that time there was a certain new synthesizer also introduced. Many musicians know it probably as a wave station, Quark wave station, which gave me the opportunity. The moment I heard it, I was sold. I mean, I had to borrow money to buy it, and I've never borrowed money to buy a synthesizer before. That was the one instrument that I heard and I instantly connected with it. I could play it for hours, really hours, creating my own sounds, creating stuff on that album. And from that album I created actually Ghost of a Mist. Ghost of a Mist is probably the most one-sided synthesizer album that I used. I think primarily 60% of all the sounds come out of the Quark wave station. Because that Quark wave station, and it wasn't around when Steve Roach made his music. That's the funny thing. Steve made the album with completely different instruments, but the Quark wave station gave me an entry point to the music of Steve Roach. These ambient layers that he put down, and where he then put the soft sequencing stuff on top of it, that gave me that sound that I wanted at that time. That was like a completely new chapter in a book opening, where the story completely deviates from whatever you thought it would be, because I started out doing a new album as Berlin School, and I was working on that album, and it felt like rehash. It felt like done that before, been there, done that, had no money for new instruments, had no money for new synthesizers, so you keep doing and I had a small setup at that time, so you keep doing the same stuff you knew. And then came the music of Steve Roach, then came the wave station, and that brought me in a completely different zone, musically completely in a different zone. And when I started doing Ghost of a Mist, from the very first moment that I did the first track, which is quite a long track, a lot of friends that I had said, "Ooh, this is different, this is cool what you do now, this is very American," and I could relate perfectly to that. The reason why, for instance, the cover of Ghost of a Mist is one of the iconic mountains in Death Valley is that it is for me a tribute to for discovering the music of Robert and of Steve. And also that whole album came very organically to me. That came very natural. I made the sounds. It still has the rumboat sequences in it, but the sequences are now not particularly sequence sounds. They're also a little bit of what Robert Rich often uses, a little bit of xylophone, wood-like sounds in it. But I used it in my way that I use it. I use it more as a sequencer sound, where he mostly does polyrhythmic stuff. So I used it in the sense of Mr. Boats, but the sounds were more of an American nature, say it like that. It's also the album I probably worked the longest on. And I think it took me at least 2 years before I finished the whole album, before I was satisfied with how it sounded. And there were two tracks that never got made on it, but we did a re-release later on when we did a release of the album itself, and then I put one track back on. And reflecting on that, I don't know why I left it off at that point, because it really fits in with the rest of the music. But that's for me. Sometimes you have the quote, a game changer. That for me was sort of a musically game changer. It gave me an idea of what my music which direction my music could go ahead of. I heard something, and like I said, I'm not shy to lend stuff from other people. If they do something brilliant, I will try to use that and incorporate it into my music. and Ghost of a Mist is a product of that. The funny thing about one track with Ghost of Mist is that there is a guitar on it, and I've always been influenced by guitar players. Always, I've always wanted to be a guitar player. I mean, to stand on stage with a guitar and be really good. That's for me, that would be one of the nicest feelings I would have. And I've known Klaus Hoffmann for a long time, who played that track on Ghost of a Mist, and Klaus and I did a lot of concerts, not together, but we were on the same bill. So I could hear his music, what he did at that time with the music he brought out, and he heard my music, and he said, "Oh, I like what you were doing." Same thing what happened with John Kerr. And I said, "Well, I really like what you're doing with your music." And in the end, I had that track, really long track, where I thought in the end it would be really nice if I'd have that Klaus Hoffmann Hoax sound, because he has a distinct guitar sound. He has that distinct guitar sound where he pitches the string, and he puts it into a certain mode of feedback, and he uses that to elevate certain notes in the music. He's never a real fast guitar player, so he doesn't play melodies. It's always the little bit of extra energy that he draws into it to certain sections of the soloing you are doing. And he can do that brilliantly. And I invited him to. I said, "Klaus, would you like to do that?" And he said, "Yeah, no problem." We live quite near. I mean, he lives less than 80 kilometers from me. Although he lives in Germany, it's really near. So he did some tests. He sent me something over. I said, "Wow, that's fantastic." So, and he knows his stuff. He knows really his stuff. And from that on, that was one of the albums where, for the first time, I really used a real other musician, other than on Dreamscape. Also on Dreamscape, I had numerous musicians helping out. Yeah, it's the moment of the time. We met each other, we liked each other, we still like each other, we like each other music. And that's the nice thing if you have many musicians living close by with you. That's one thing that I really like about Europe. For instance, also around Eindhoven, there's something called the Eindhoven School. There are a lot of musicians there who influence each other. So it's never static. Your musical feeling, your musical creation, it's never static, because you got influences everywhere. And I'm like a sponge. I slurp up everything from everywhere, and I love that, and I'll incorporate it into my music.